We're currently experiencing a bit of a heat wave here in New York City, so I thought I would talk about the perfumes I reach for to really beat the heat in the most hot, humid, gross weather we get in summer. So first off, we're going to start with Les Indemodables, and the only one I own from the brand so far, Escalon Indonési. This is from their more affordable cologne range, and this one, I'll probably spray a lot of these on because they're light enough, I don't mind. This one features an ambergris tincture along with bergamot and orange. It also says lemon, Australian sandalwood in the base, and jasmine. But what I really like about this, it has that real ozonic freshness. Along with the citrus, you get this like mineral seaside quality, and it's really unique as far as colognes go. I've not smelled other colognes much like it. I would also say it's a really good maybe replacement for something like Louis Vuitton Orage for much cheaper, and I think this is better as well. But it has that kind of ozonic, wet stone, but mixed with citrus and aromatic. It is light, but it actually lasts a pretty good amount of time. I'd say 5-6 hours. You can still detect some of the trail even beyond that. But yeah, really refreshing. I think my favorite thing about it is just that it's really unique among other colognes that I've tried, and it's just really satisfying. It gives you that fresh, cool feel that you're looking for in high heat. Kind of along the same lines, and speaking of Louis Vuitton, also the one Vuitton I do own, Afternoon Swim. This one has been talked about and hyped up a lot. I've got to say it's not worth the price for what it is, but I just became somewhat obsessed with this one summer. I kept smelling it, and I just decided if I'm gonna get one LV, I think this is a good representative of what they do well, which is this very kind of fresh, bright, carefree summer smell. Another thing I like about it, or find interesting about it, is in the dry down, it almost smells bad in an interesting way, almost like a dirty chlorinated pool, or on the cheaper side, like a generic kind of men's spray-on deodorant, which might sound like, why would you buy it if you think it smells bad? But I sort of like this somewhat subversive idea that this fragrance that all the influencers are hawking, and it's like kind of like one of those really basic B fragrances, actually smells a little bit nasty in the base. It reminds me of the way like Alexander McQueen famously sewed I think a slur or curse word into a royal's jacket, into the pocket of their jacket. Now, I doubt Jacques Cavalier had anything so subversive in mind, but I find an interesting dichotomy with the Amouage Guidance as well, which somehow took off as a real big influencer favorite. But to me, it smells like bodily fluids and like nasty amberwood patchouli. It's just really kind of a nasty smell. So anyway, Afternoon Swim is not a nasty smell, but I think there's something a little bit strange and borderline off-putting, just a hint of it in the base that keeps it a little interesting for me. But other than that, there's almost no more like really bright, like 3D, like high definition mandarin citrus that I know, and it really evokes the feeling of being poolside. But like I said, along with that is a little bit of like that chlorinated smell, a little bit of that like pool that needs to be cleaned stench, ever so slightly. I believe this one lists ambergris, and I doubt there's real ambergris, but maybe what I'm detecting is part of that ambergris accord. Yeah, smelling these side by side, Escalon Indonési is much more soft and subdued, while this is much more bright, but also sort of synthetic smelling. But yeah, interesting comparison. On to a big old classic, Dolce & Gabbana pour Homme. I know that the vintage is highly sought after, and I wore it. It was kind of funny enough, my first perfume I can recall going to a counter and buying when I was about 14 years old. I think it was for a birthday, and my mom took me to, it was probably Macy's, let me pick one out, and I guess I had good taste because I bought this, and that was the original version made in Italy with the sticker, and I still have a little bit of that left For years and years, I was afraid to rebuy it because I heard about how bad the reformulations had been, until another YouTuber mentioned that the Made in France really was pretty good. And I tried it at a discount outlet. I was like, oh, I should spray this on. And you know what? It smelled just like the Dolce & Gabbana I remembered. And I thought, how stupid that I didn't even bother trying it because of what other people said about reformulation. And I think that's a good lesson. Try for yourself. It's true, things get reformulated, especially the older a fragrance goes, and the more the license especially changes hands, the more likely it is that things might change. But who knows, you might be surprised. Now, I won't say it smells exactly like the vintage, but it smelled just like I remember. It has all the characteristics. It's still legible as that perfume that I knew well. I did try them side by side once, and the old one was just kind of what you expect from an older perfume. It's denser, it's losing some of its brightness up top. But I would say most of the differences I could chalk up to age more than reformulation. I do think maybe there's more of those heavy notes like tobacco in the older one, and this does feel lighter, almost like a eau de cologne version of that. But they're still quite cheap for a large bottle, so you can really just spray with reckless abandon. What's so nice about this is that it really has like a lot of complexity. It has like a strong lavender, herbaceous elements to it, but I think the beautiful lavender is actually my favorite part. It has a real brightness to the citrus. And yeah, it really brings me back to that smell, that scent memory of wearing this. So I knew this fragrance very well. And what's interesting is it still stands up from wearing it as a 14-year-old to now being a total perfume head. I still think it's a fantastic composition. So while we're talking oldies but goodies, I'll bring out one more, Eau de Guerlain. This has to be my best budget purchase of all time. I think this was a tester, but luckily came with the cap, just came in a generic box. I think I paid about $30 for it. And what a surprise. This is probably the most complex and interesting cologne style fragrance that I know. That complexity could be a turnoff for some because it does give it a bit more of a vintage characteristic, but I don't think it goes overly vintagey. It doesn't go like in a classic men's barber shop direction, but maybe some of the oak moss in the base and the complex spiciness of it gives a little bit of a vintage character. I'll spray this one on strips so I don't oversaturate myself. But it's really long lasting, it's really strong, it's incredibly complex. Yeah, starts with a hyper realistic and bracing lemon. Could go towards the lemon cleaner direction if you're sensitive to that, but I'm not. But yeah, it's just this like swirl. Sometimes when you feel a lot of aromatics, I get this sense of things just like swirling in the air, and it's this swirl of notes. And deep in the base, you do get kind of a creamy, I wouldn't say literally vanilla, but you can see how it's like a nod to the Guerlain nod. There's something creamy and round, tonka-ish in the base that gives it a really lovely kind of soft cloud, like a fluffiness to it that lasts for a long time. But the bright lemon aspect of this also lasts for a really long time. I believe this is still readily available for pretty cheap, and I highly recommend it. While we're speaking of Guerlains, another one off mentioned in summer list is Herba Fresca. I've got this cute little one. I thought I would mention it here again to say that it is still in production. I wasn't sure. I checked the Guerlain website and it's still there. So it's still available. Last I checked, it had kind of dried up on discounters, but you never know, these things come back. This one, when I first got it, I kind of thought, meh, I don't need it. I have Geranium Pour Monsieur, and that's a slightly better mint. And I still do like Geranium Pour Monsieur slightly better. This goes, I guess this is just less complex, but it is different. But the last time I wore it, I was surprised by the longevity because I remember thinking this was just a couple hour perfume. But the last time I wore it, it really lasted a long time. But like it says, it really smells like fresh crushed mint. You get that leafiness to it. It's really beautiful. There's almost a pepperiness. It's such a wonderful like invocation of nature. And it lasts a long time. It's bracing. It's really refreshing. It does borderline go in that toothpastey mint direction, but again, I'm not bothered by that. I'm a fan of mint in general, but that's something to be aware of if you're not. Also, good lesson, and maybe we don't always need the big bottle. I feel like I've used this a lot and I've had this for several years, but look, there's still quite a lot left. All right, moving on though. I've mentioned this one before, but I had to include one Chanel, 1957. On the most hot, muggy, gross days, this one is really a star because it lasts forever, and those musks really sing in the heat, and they don't melt away the way some other perfumes can get kind of melted by the heat and the humidity. So if you want to be smelling fresh and clean, I also find that by using so many different musks, I get different facets every time I wear this in different temperatures, different atmospheres, pull out different aspects of the perfume. So 1957 is probably the number one if I want to smell nice, maybe if I'm going somewhere and it's just disgusting out, the number one fragrance I reach for. Along those lines of things that last longer than you might imagine or possible is Profumum Roma's Aquaviva. This one is all about lemon, but it's propped up by kind of a juniper backbone. But I think this is a really genius combination. It's a very simple perfume in that it kind of just smells exactly like those two things. But the way that the juniper provides this kind of green woodsy backdrop to keep the lemon going forever and ever. This is one of those fragrances that I've still smelled on my skin post-shower. I suppose you could accuse it of being overly simple, and because of the long longevity, you could get tired of it, but I find that it's so natural smelling and so lovely that I don't get tired of it. Unlike some synthetics that are a little too pungent or nose tingling or just loud, you do get tired of them and wish they would calm down or go away. But this is so natural and so beautiful that I don't mind smelling kind of the same smell throughout the day with Aquaviva. So really fantastic one. Let's see. Another kind of off the beaten path one I may have mentioned before, Masque Milano's White Whale. I wore this the other day too and was really enjoying it. Not the strongest. I ended up reapplying halfway through the day because I was really enjoying it. But what I appreciate about this is it's very unique among other summer fragrances, yet it still works in high heat really well. So it supposedly has a rope accord, saltiness, olibanum, ambergris, osmanthus. I get the osmanthus giving a nice kind of bright floral opening. And then, yeah, it's this mix of kind of sea brine, but it's not quite salty in the way that these two are. And other aromatics, it says patchouli, interestingly. But yeah, it has legs, but it has, maybe it's the name giving me this influence, but white, like this whiteness to it, this bright whiteness to it, but at the same time kind of this soft, mellow, herbaceous backdrop. I will say something in the base comes off just ever so slightly designery, but that's not necessarily a terrible thing, like ambroxany in the base. I think it adds longevity, it adds legs, and it adds a nice kind of smoothness to the base. But yeah, I just find it a really interesting perfume when you get bored of citrus in summer and you want to reach for something a little bit different. I think White Whale really scratches that itch. Along those lines of interesting perfumes, Hermes Après le Mousson. I believe this is discontinued now, unfortunately, but it might still be available on discounters. I have to admit, Persola's turned me onto this. You talked about it a few times. I had tried most of the Jardin. I have a little like mini coffret of all of them except this one. And while I think they're nice, I was never quite convinced by them. Mostly it's the dry down I find is similar across many of them. Kind of this soapy, clean, musky thing that wasn't my favorite. And I kind of believe, unless you're really a huge fan of that dry down, maybe you only need one or two from the line if you like the dry down, because I think having more than one, aside from the newer one, Cetera is quite different than the rest of the line. But I think having them are redundant. So if kind of pick your favorite combination of top notes and go with that. But what interested me in this one is supposedly it has that kind of petrichor, earth after the rain smell. And oh boy, it does. Again, Jean-Claude Elena is a master illusionist. At first spray, given the name, you smell exactly that. You smell earth or concrete. It's not necessarily very dirty, so maybe I would say more like concrete after a rain. But I believe this accord is somehow an illusion created from other notes, other aromatic notes. I get something a little bit fruity in the base. Yeah, and I think those aromatic notes are the cardamom and ginger. Again, when I hadn't looked this up, I didn't kind of parse those notes, but I got the image of the after the rain. But then when I look it up, it's like you can almost separate those notes and see how they're coming together to create that effect. So it says water notes, ginger lily, pepper, coriander, cardamom, citruses, vetiver. But yeah, again, I like this because I find it very interesting in terms of the usual freshies. It's kind of an alternative path away from citrus. And yeah, it's very evocative, and I enjoy the dry down. Again, it goes into that kind of linear, kind of white, musky dry down, not in the same way as Chanel. I suppose every brand has their own kind of signature base materials. Of course, things can go across brands, but I notice that the dry downs of certain brands or certain lines often have a continuity. So if you know others, you might kind of know what I'm talking about. But yeah, this one I really love for the opening and for that evocation of wet earth. And then 2 Cartier to finish up, another small guy. This is Cartier Pure Kingan. I bought a little set of 3 small ones from the Les Epures line. And once again, I feel like I've doused myself in this because it's quite light, and I've had this 5 years and there's still some left. But it's the one out of the 3. The other 2 were Pure Magnolia and Pure Muguet. So 1 out of the 3, I would really like a full bottle. The problem is these are just as expensive as the Les Epures, but they're really kind of like eau de toilette, eau de cologne strength, and it stings a little bit to pay those prices for something so light. But Kingan, if you don't know, is the Japanese word for kumquat, and that's what it is. It's a pure kumquat. I have my experience eating kumquat is actually in Japanese dessert. There's a mochi called like Kingan mochi, which surrounds, I suppose it's a candied Kingan in the center. And having tasted that, this smell is spot on. It smells just like that taste. So to me, it's somewhere in between an orange and a lemon. It has the brightness of a lemon, but sort of an oranginess in the background. Really beautiful, really satisfying when it's hot and nasty out. What I like about this too is it has a really nice green accord, and I think Mathilde Laurent does really beautiful green notes in several perfumes. And yeah, it actually lasts decently long. The first few times I wore it, I remember thinking it disappeared within a few hours, but if you really apply it a lot, again, the green notes stick around for quite a while, and some of the musk sticks around, but it's just so bracing, it's so bright, it's so refreshing. So yeah, highly recommend, give a try to Pure Kingan if the idea of something between a lemon and an orange strikes your fancy. Compared to like Frederic Malle Cologne Bigarade, I find that a lot more like dark orange feeling and a lot warmer feeling, whereas this is like bright, like the treble is turned way up. So yeah, really beautiful. And one last Cartier, which actually I tried side by side today, L'Heure Brillante, and I found not terribly different from Pure Kingan. I sensed the same green note in L'Heure Brillante, but there's also a gin note, and it references aldehydes. So it doesn't smell like Kingan, it doesn't pull to mind that fruit, but you can really tell that they're created by the same artist. I don't get aldehydes in the way that I think of them from Chanel aldehydes. There's not really a fizziness, but there is a little bit of that like white starched shirt smell to it. And again, a really nice green accord. I don't get anything literally gin, but I can imagine it again, I can imagine kind of a fizzy gin cocktail. This one I bought for a decent price as a tester. Again, a little sad when they don't come with caps, but whatever. But yeah, also just a really satisfying wear in the highest, grossest heat. I think all of these do well in humidity. We often experience really nasty humidity here And you really need something sharp to kind of cut through the humidity and give you that sense of freshness and brightness and vibrancy. And I think that's something that all of these selections provide. So there you go, and I hope it cools down soon.